only getting by. Ladies and gentlemen, Ron Pappalardo. Our next speaker is Ron Pappalardo, and he told me that his name, translated from the Italian, means Fat Daddy. Pappalardo. And I think Fat Daddy is a good nickname for him because his kids say it's a good nickname for him. And he also claims to have gained a little weight since last year. So Pappalardo. I got to meet him backstage. He's a very funny guy. Although he is a funny guy, he's dealing with some very serious topics, like suicide prevention, anti-bullying, and beating depression. But please welcome to the stage, Ron Pappalardo.
Thank you. Hello, Hershey! How are y'all doing? Everybody stand up, stand up, stand up. Stand up, everybody stand up. All right, on three, I want you to turn around and shake hands. The guy behind you, 1, 2, 3, turn around and shake hands. He's behind you. Oh, that was Actually, I think that the name Fat Daddy is appropriate also because I want to talk to you just as a dad, okay? I have 4 children, and 3 of them are in college. One's working on a PhD at NC State University in psychology. The other 2, NC State? Yeah, we made the Sweet 16, man. Anyway, the other 2 are undergrads just like you. Now, unfortunately, I have to speak about a very sad topic. Even though, like I said, I'm a funny guy, we have to talk about a serious topic. But we have to deal with it. Suicide prevention. Dealing with depression. Stopping bullying in our schools. I had a 4th child. His name was Joshua. And when he was 17 years old, he committed suicide. Now, he had suffered with depression for a long time, ever since middle school, because in middle school, guess what happened to him? He was bullied. And he never recovered from that experience. So it just dogged him, and finally, when he was 17, he took his life. We don't know what happened that day that caused him to take his life. We'll never know. But I hope, I don't have the time to explain what parents go through when they lose a child. But I hope that your parents will never have to experience that because it's horrible. Okay? So that day, when he took his life, is actually the first day back at school, his senior year of high school. And like I said, we don't know what happened. But he came home from school. He went into the backyard and got the gas can from the lawnmower, went into the woods, poured the gas, and lit himself on fire. He died that night in the hospital. So, I didn't know anything about suicide when this happened. But this was 8 years ago, and in those 8 years, I've learned a lot about suicide. I've learned, most importantly, that in most cases it's preventable if you know what the warning signs are and what to look for. I've learned that this year, 32,000 Americans will die from suicide. We talked about the drunk driving deaths. That's twice as many will die from suicide as the drunk driving deaths. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The American Association of Suicidology estimates that 1 out of every 12 college students will attempt suicide. That's over 500,000 a year. And you won't hear about most of them. But over 50% will injure themselves so severely that they'll have to be hospitalized for the injuries. And out of that half, tens of thousands of those will become permanently disabled. Permanently disabled. I'm going to give you an example. And I have to say, I'm not here to shock you. Nobody wants to talk about suicide. In fact, I don't even like to talk about it. But it's something we have to deal with. I'm going to tell you the story of A.J. Reed. He was 16 years old. He decided to end his life. He took a shotgun, pointed it at his head, and pulled the trigger. He blew off his nose, his lips, blinded himself in both eyes, and completely disfigured his face. But he lived through it. If you attempt suicide, you have less than a 10% chance that you're going to kill yourself, but you have a better than 50% chance you're going to wind up in the hospital. It's not a very good option, is it? So he's alive, but he has to, on top of all the other problems, he has to live blind and with a disfigured face for the rest of his life. Serious stuff. So, like I said, I didn't come here to shock you. I came here to offer solutions. So what's the solution? That's what I really want to share with you. Like I said, suicide is preventable. but only if we know what the causes are and how to deal with them. And I have strategies for dealing with that. Last year, I had the pleasure of speaking at Penn State Harrisburg, and I got an email a week later from a young lady, and she told me, I only wish that you had come and spoken at our college 2 years earlier, because I attempted suicide, and you would have saved me a lot of suffering if I heard you 2 years ago. So we can't wait on this issue any longer. Remember, 500,000 every year attempt suicide, and the suicide attempts, in one sense, they're more harmful than the deaths. I know that sounds strange, but if you permanently disable yourself, you're going to suffer for the rest of your life. So it's something we have to deal with. So how do we defeat suicide? That's the real issue. Does anybody know what the #1 cause of suicide is? Yes, depression. So really, if we defeat depression, we defeat suicide. So what I do is I share strategies about how to defeat depression. Real simple things that everybody can incorporate into their lifestyle. For example, did you know that just the simple act of keeping a diary or a journal reduces the incidence of depression? Here's another example. Service. I don't know why, but whenever you do something nice for somebody else, it makes you feel really good. Your brain chemistry changes and you feel good. I'm going to give you an example from my own life experience. Believe it or not, when I was in my 20s, I lived in a monastery. And yes, I did take the vow of chastity for over 10 years and kept it. So anyway, in that monastery, one day, I woke up and I was feeling really horrible. I had this real, you ever had just a dark cloud, you know, this dark mental state, and it was bugging me, and it was telling me, you know, you have to leave this monastery, you can't stay here. Well, you know what? I didn't want to go back to my previous life, and so I went into the chapel, and I told God, I'm not leaving here until you take this feeling out of my brain, or I drop dead right here. And I prayed literally for hours. And after a few hours, this inspiration came into my head. Go to the dining hall. You know, we had a big communal dining hall for all the brothers. So I go down to the dining hall, and there's this guy sitting there, this stranger sitting there, and he's all alone. And I look around, and I'm like, what? You know, where is everybody? Nobody's taking care of this visitor. So I came up to the guy and I said, excuse me, can I get you something to drink? He said, yeah, I'd like a cup of tea. So I went over to the kitchen. We had a big institutional kitchen. And I remember still to this day vividly, you know, pouring the milk in so it won't spill, stirring the sugar, you know, and then bringing it out to the guy. And I brought it out, and I put it down at the table. And then I turned around, and I took 1, 2, 3 steps, and I went, oh my God, it's gone. The dark clouds lifted. It's totally gone. So sometimes the simple act of making somebody a cup of tea can save your life. So service. So that's just another example. I want to give you one last story that I'll leave with you. There's one of my favorite people who really got victory defeating suicide is a man named Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl. Those of you who are psych majors may have heard of him. And he was like the equivalent of a college president in Vienna, Austria back in the 1920s. And he became world famous in Europe. You know why? During his tenure, there wasn't a single suicide. Not one in his school. And everybody wanted to, you know, what's your secret? And so Dr. Frankl really researched it. And he came to the conclusion that the problem was young people in Western Europe and America were suffering from something he called an existential vacuum. Have you ever heard of that before? And what it means is that a lot of us, we don't really know exactly who we are and like why we're here and what the purpose of our life is. So when we don't have deep meaning or deep purpose in our lives, sometimes we think, well, it's just not worth living, and we give up. So Dr. Frankl was very successful helping people find profound meaning and deep meaning in their lives, and saved countless lives for doing that. I really hope that I'll get the chance to come to your college so I can share these things with you. I want to share with you, you know, what are the strategies for defeating suicide? How can we recognize the warning signs of suicide in our friends? And what should we do about it if we find it? How can I defeat depression? How can I find meaning in my life? It's a really important subject. And like I said, I know it's not you know, that exciting of a thing. But I promise you, if you come to my program, you will leave there so inspired, so uplifted, and so enthusiastic about your future that people won't believe you went to a suicide prevention, anti-bullying, anti-depression talk. I promise you that. Thanks very much. I'm going to give an education session tomorrow at 10 a.m. You're all invited, and if you have any questions, you can see me at booth 65. Thanks so much.
Pappalardo, everybody. We are very lucky to be here. You guys